The distress signal came without warning, a cry of desperation that cut across the void between stars. No one knew how it managed to pierce the endless silence of space, or why it carried on frequencies long thought impossible for human technology to intercept. But when Earth's most dangerous warships received it, they all reacted the same way, like predators stirred by the scent of blood. It was not a request for help. It was a command, spoken in tones of dread and authority, as though the sender knew that only the deadliest of machines would dare to answer. Across Earth's naval command, alarms lit up. Ancient protocols that hadn't been touched in decades suddenly activated. Deep within the Atlantic, hidden beneath layers of ocean, one colossal warship opened its eyes after a long, forced sleep. Its black hull gleamed like obsidian, built to endure the fury of suns and the crushing cold between galaxies. In orbit, another vessel, older but no less feared, rotated silently, its cannons still primed as if it had been waiting for this very moment. In forgotten shipyards scattered around the planet, more awakened, giants of war that once decided the fate of entire fleets, now rising from their slumber because something had summoned them. Commanders who had once believed these ships were only myths now stood trembling before the sight of them. The records called them Earth's final line, the war machines that had turned impossible wars into victories. Their names were never spoken lightly, for each was bound to a legacy written in fire and blood. These were not ships made for defense or mercy. They were weapons forged to annihilate. And now someone or something had demanded their return. The message itself remained a mystery. The few who studied its signal pattern insisted it wasn't human. Its structure carried echoes of alien dialects no one could fully translate, yet it had threaded human language through its core. It repeated a single phrase in a voice that was neither male nor female, neither machine nor organic. The gate has been broken. The worlds are falling. Answer the call. No coordinates were given, only a stream of impossible numbers and a vibration that seemed to rattle through bone and metal alike. The warships, however, understood. As if bound by a pact older than memory, they aligned toward a single point in space, a point hidden from ordinary star charts. The crews chosen to guide these behemoths did not volunteer. They were chosen. Soldiers, engineers, and tacticians found themselves summoned without explanation, pulled from every corner of Earth's scattered colonies. Some resisted, others obeyed, but none could escape. Those who stepped aboard described an unsettling sense that the ships themselves were alive, watching them, weighing their worth. The moment the hatches sealed, every chosen soul felt the same whisper in their minds. You will carry my fire. Among the crews were those who had fought in Earth's last great war, veterans scarred by battles that nearly destroyed humanity. There were also the young, drawn into a storm they didn't understand. Some called it destiny, others a curse, but all of them shared the same unspoken fear, that answering the signal meant walking into a war that no human fleet could hope to survive. And yet, there was no turning back. The ships did not allow it. When the first of the warships broke atmosphere, cities trembled beneath their shadows. Civilians watched from below, some in awe, others in terror, knowing that history was shifting. Rumors spread like wildfire, whispers of an alien invasion, of ancient alliances being invoked, of Earth itself being dragged into a war beyond its stars. The governments could not contain it. Everywhere, people asked the same question. Who had sent the call, and why had Earth's deadliest warships been chosen to answer? The journey began with silence. The fleet moved without broadcasting, slipping past the moon and into the abyss. The crews tried to decode the numbers from the message, but the ships already knew their path. Each one navigated with flawless precision, their engines burning with an energy source no living human could fully understand. They weren't following orders from Earth's command. They were following something far older, something embedded deep within their cores. Days stretched into weeks, and tension grew. Strange readings began to flicker across their sensors. Distortions in space, echoes of colossal battles fought far away. The crews spoke little, each one haunted by the thought that they were heading into a trap. And then, without warning, the stars ahead shifted. A vast emptiness unfolded, a wound in the fabric of space itself. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was an opening, raw, jagged, and alive with a power that made every human heart tremble. Beyond it, shapes moved, vast and menacing, too many to count. Something waited on the other side, and it had been waiting a long time. The signal pulsed again, stronger than before. The gate has been broken. The worlds are falling. Answer the call! But now, woven into the words, came another layer, an echo so faint it was almost missed. A warning, perhaps, or a threat. The crews leaned in as translators struggled to capture it. The last phrase that broke through the static made every soul aboard fall silent. If you do not come, Earth will burn. The commanders exchanged grim looks. They knew then that this was no distant war, no conflict they could observe from the safety of home. Whatever had broken the gate was spreading, and if Earth's warships did not stand against it, their world would be next. But as the ships inched closer to the rift, new signals flooded their systems, signals that weren't calls for help. They were coordinates. They were battle formations. And they weren't human. One young officer stared at the data, his voice trembling as he read it aloud. They're expecting us. They've prepared for us. The room fell silent. The ships continued their advance, their engines roaring like thunder across the void. Each crew member felt the weight of what was coming. Earth's warships had answered the call, but now they faced a truth none of them wanted to accept. They weren't arriving as saviors. They were arriving as prey, and just as the rift widened, spilling blinding light across the fleet, a shadow darker than the void itself began to emerge. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't even a single ship. It was something vast, ancient, and alive. Something that made even Earth's deadliest war machines seem fragile by comparison. The signal pulsed one last time, shattering every channel in their systems. And this time the voice carried no request, no command. Only a chilling certainty. Welcome to the war. The shadow that emerged from the rift was unlike anything the crews had ever seen. Its size dwarfed their own warships, a colossal form that moved with deliberate slowness, as if it didn't need speed to prove its dominance. No readings made sense. The sensors flickered, failed, and then came alive again with numbers that contradicted themselves. Distances stretched and collapsed, shapes bent in ways the human eye could barely process. Some swore they saw teeth the size of mountains. Others swore it was a fortress bristling with weapons. Whatever it was, the signal had brought them to it. And the warships of Earth were now staring into the eyes of something that existed beyond their understanding. The commanders did their best to hold steady, issuing orders to crews who tried to hide their fear behind duty. These weren't ordinary men and women. They had been chosen, drawn into this mission by forces none of them could control. Still, they were human, and humanity had always survived by adapting, by facing the impossible and refusing to break. They whispered among themselves in the mess halls, trading theories in low voices. Some believed they were answering an ancient pact, something Earth's leaders had hidden, a deal made with civilizations long forgotten. Others thought it was a trap set by hostile species to lure Earth's best weapons away from home. And a few wondered if the ships themselves weren't truly human creations, but gifts, or curses, from something far older. The ships gave no answers. Only silence and the hum of systems that felt more alive than mechanical. Every so often, crew members reported hearing whispers when they were alone. Engineers swore the bulkheads pulsed like veins when the engines roared. One pilot confessed he dreamed of endless battlefields, not his own memories, but visions of wars fought long before he was born. When he described them, others admitted they had seen the same things. Entire crews were dreaming the same dream, as though the ships were seeding their minds with memories not their own. It unsettled them, but it also gave them a strange confidence, as if the ships were preparing them for what lay beyond the rift. Back on Earth, chaos brewed. The sudden awakening of the warships had not gone unnoticed. News networks showed endless streams of footage, black holes cutting across skies, oceans parting as giants rose from the depths, orbiting vessels breaking silence after decades. People asked questions that governments refused to answer. Who had sent the call? What danger was so great that Earth's most dangerous war machines had been unleashed again? Fear spread across cities and colonies alike, but with it came a surge of pride. Humanity remembered the legends, how these ships had turned hopeless wars into victories, how they had made enemies tremble. If the warships had been summoned, then it meant Earth still mattered in the vastness of the galaxy. The crews aboard the fleet weren't so certain. In the void between stars, they felt the weight of being far from home. The rift pulsed like a wound in reality, always shifting, always hungry. Every day they trained, drilled, and studied the fractured message that had summoned them, hoping to find a clue. The linguists worked endlessly, comparing fragments of alien dialects, but the message remained stubbornly mysterious. The only new breakthrough came when one of the younger technicians noticed that the numbers hidden in the signal aligned with ancient star maps. Maps recorded long before Earth's first space flight. That discovery unsettled even the most hardened veterans. Whoever had sent the message had known humanity long before humanity had reached the stars. The closer they drew to the rift, the more strange phenomena they encountered. Ghost signals appeared on their comms, voices in languages no one could translate, sometimes screaming, sometimes pleading. Distortions bent their sensors, showing ghostly fleets that flickered in and out of existence. Once, a massive shadow swept across their path, so vast that for several minutes they thought they had entered another eclipse. When the distortion cleared, nothing remained. It left the uneasy feeling that something was always watching, just beyond their reach. Amid the unease, bonds formed among the crews. In the face of fear, people found comfort in one another. Old soldiers shared stories of battles that once felt like the worst humanity could endure, though now they seemed almost small compared to what was coming. The younger ones listened, trying to mask their terror with humor. They teased, argued, and leaned on one another because the silence of space was too heavy without it. For all the strangeness of their mission, it was still human hearts that kept the warships alive inside. And the ships, in turn, seemed to accept them. Systems ran smoother when the crews worked in harmony, weapons charged faster when they were united in purpose. It was as if the machines themselves fed on their spirit. One night, if such a word had meaning in endless darkness, alarms blared across the lead vessel. The crew rushed to their stations expecting an attack, but the threat wasn't external. It came from within. The ship's systems had activated something deep in its core, a chamber no human had ever entered. The doors opened without command, and inside was a sphere suspended in glowing fields of energy. Symbols etched across its surface pulsed with the same rhythm as the original signal. No one dared touch it, yet every crew member felt the pull of it in their minds, like a heartbeat syncing with their own. Some claimed it spoke to them, though no words were heard aloud. It was only a feeling, a promise of power, and a warning of sacrifice. The commanders reported the anomaly to the rest of the fleet, only to discover that each warship had revealed something similar, each one carrying its own artifact sealed within. They realized then that the ships hadn't just been weapons. They were vessels carrying something far older, something tied to the very reason the call had been made. Whatever was beyond the rift hadn't summoned ships alone. It had summoned what those ships carried. Days later, when they finally reached the rift's edge, the shadow they had seen earlier was gone. Instead, the opening pulsed with light, and beyond it, they glimpsed fragments of broken worlds. Shattered planets hung like corpses, their surfaces scorched and split apart. Space itself seemed unstable, filled with cracks of glowing energy that licked across the darkness like fire in a storm. And in that chaos drifted remnants of fleets, alien vessels torn apart, some still burning, others frozen in silence. The sight crushed whatever hope they had clung to. If this was what awaited them on the other side, then they were stepping into a battlefield already lost. Yet the ships pressed forward, as if the decision had never been theirs. The crews gripped their consoles, voices tight with fear, but no one dared to defy the path. Each warship's engines roared in unison, pulling them closer to the breach. The rift widened in response, as though welcoming them, dragging them into its storm. Just before they crossed, the signal returned, stronger than ever, filling their systems, their minds, their very bones. It wasn't the calm voice they had heard before. This time it was raw, filled with urgency, almost desperation. The words were clearer, sharper, undeniable. Answer the call, or all worlds fall. And with that, the warships plunged into the rift, their hulls vanishing into blinding light, their crews bracing themselves for a war they still could not understand. None knew if they would return, or what waited for them in the broken worlds beyond. All they knew was that Earth's deadliest warships had been summoned not just to fight, but to uncover a truth buried in battles that had begun long before humanity ever rose from the dirt. The plunge through the rift was nothing like crossing into ordinary space. For the crews, it was as though the universe itself turned inside out. Colors bled together into shades no human eye had seen before. Sounds vibrated through their bones, though no air carried them, and gravity pulled in directions that defied logic. Some screamed, some prayed, others simply held on to their stations and waited for the tearing sensation to end. When at last the storm quieted and the ships emerged, what awaited them was far worse than any nightmare they had prepared for. Before them stretched a battlefield so vast it could have swallowed entire solar systems. Fragments of shattered moons and gutted planets drifted like corpses across the void. Wreckage of alien fleets, ships larger than cities, floated broken, their fires long extinguished. Everywhere, the evidence of destruction screamed one truth. Whatever force had broken the gate had not just defeated its enemies, it had erased them. And yet, in that silence, something moved. Shadows glided across the wreckage, immense and unearthly, shapes that seemed to shift whenever eyes tried to focus on them. The enemy was here, waiting, but it revealed itself only in glimpses. The warships of Earth formed into a formation without a single order from their commanders. The ships seemed to anticipate what was needed, aligning as though guided by instincts older than their human crews. Engines burned steady, weapons hummed with readiness, and the strange artifacts at their cores pulsed in rhythm with the distant heartbeat of the battlefield. The commanders could only watch in awe and unease, realizing they were no longer leading the ships. They were passengers in a struggle far greater than themselves. On one vessel, a young tactical officer stared at the endless wreckage with wide eyes. His family had grown up believing Earth stood at the center of the galaxy's struggles, that humanity's wars were the wars that mattered. Now, confronted by the ruins of empires far older and grander than anything Earth had ever built, he felt that belief collapse. Humanity was late to the stage, a newcomer in a war that had raged long before Earth even dreamed of the stars. It unsettled him, and yet it also filled him with fire. If those ancient powers had fallen, then humanity had no choice but to rise, no matter how impossible it seemed. Whispers spread across the fleet. Crews spoke of the shadows that moved through the wreckage, the way their sensors gave conflicting reports, the way time itself seemed to bend the longer they stared at the rift. Some claimed they saw faces in the drifting debris, alien and human alike, staring back at them through cracked visors and shattered hulls. Others swore they felt something pulling at their thoughts, a presence probing for weakness. Even in silence, the enemy pressed against them, reminding them that they were intruders here. In the mess halls, tension boiled into arguments. Soldiers who once trusted only in their commanders now whispered about whether the ships themselves were trustworthy. Engineers who touched the artifacts in the hidden chambers admitted to hearing voices urging them forward, voices that promised power if they simply obeyed. It divided the crews. Some believed the ships were guiding them, offering them a chance to survive. Others feared they were being used, manipulated by machines, or something far worse. The arguments never lasted long. Duty always pulled them back to their stations. But the unease remained, a shadow hanging over every conversation. The commanders tried to hold their people together, but even they felt doubt. They had been chosen without explanation, given no orders from Earth, no assurances of what lay ahead. Some wondered aloud whether Earth had known of this war and hidden it, fearing the panic it would cause. Others believed the signal had bypassed Earth entirely, reaching directly to the ships themselves, as though Earth's governments no longer mattered in the scale of what was unfolding. That thought chilled them most of all, for it meant their mission was not one of choice, but of destiny. Then came the first sign of movement. From the debris field ahead, a shape detached itself from the shadows. At first it appeared like more wreckage drifting on invisible tides, but as it drew closer, its scale became clear. It was a ship, or something like one, long, jagged, and alive with strange pulses of light that crawled across its hull like veins of fire. It moved without engines, gliding smoothly, and yet every sensor screamed that it was accelerating. Behind it, more shapes followed, each different, each alien, yet all carrying the same unnatural design as though they were grown, not built. The enemy had finally shown itself, and it had come in numbers. The warships of Earth locked weapons, their crews bracing for the inevitable clash, but something strange happened. The enemy ships did not fire. Instead, they spread out across the wreckage, surrounding the fleet in silence, as if studying them. For long minutes, no one moved, no weapons discharged. It was a standoff of unbearable tension, and in that silence the signal returned, not from the rift this time, but from the enemy itself. It was not words, not sound, but an intrusion that ripped through every mind aboard the warships. Images flooded them. Planets burning, stars collapsing, entire civilizations begging for salvation before being swallowed whole. And at the end of it all, a single truth pressed into their thoughts. You are late. The crew staggered, some clutching their heads, others gasping as if air had been stolen from their lungs. The message carried no anger, only a cold certainty, as though the enemy had expected them for centuries and was only now acknowledging their presence. Some swore they felt laughter beneath it, an echo of triumph, as if humanity had stepped willingly into a trap. The warships responded by raising shields and charging their weapons, the artifacts at their cores glowing brighter, pulsing in time with the heartbeat of the enemy fleet. Inside one vessel, a subplot unfolded quietly. A group of engineers who had been studying their artifact in secret finally revealed what they had learned. The symbols etched across its surface were not just decoration, they were maps, star charts marking locations across the galaxy. Each artifact carried a different set, and when compared, they formed a greater whole, a network pointing to something vast and hidden. The engineers whispered that the artifacts weren't just guiding the warships to battle. They were leading humanity to something buried deep within the stars. But before they could uncover its purpose, the alarms screamed again. The enemy had begun to move. The first clash was sudden. One alien vessel surged forward, its hull tearing open to reveal weapons that glowed with a heat that bent space itself. A beam of light carved across the void, striking one of Earth's warships. Shields flared, metal groaned, but the ship held. In response, Earth's warships unleashed their fury. Cannons fired with precision, missiles streaked like falling stars, and beams of pure energy ripped into the alien hull. The silence of space shattered into fire and chaos. Yet even as the alien ship broke apart, its pieces did not die. They twisted, reformed, and became smaller vessels, each just as deadly as the whole. The crews realized then the true horror of their enemy. They weren't fighting machines that could be destroyed. They were fighting something alive, something that thrived on destruction, multiplying with every blow. The battle spread across the wreckage, shadows weaving between broken fleets, Earth's warships firing in disciplined lines, their human crews straining under the weight of impossible odds. For every alien vessel destroyed, two more emerged. And through it all, the artifacts pulsed brighter, as though feeding on the conflict, as though waiting for something. The tension deepened when one commander received a private transmission. Not from Earth, not from the fleet, but from the artifact itself. The voice was clear, undeniable, and human. Do not resist. To win, you must surrender. He froze, torn between duty and the whisper of something that seemed to know the future. He said nothing to his crew, but the words burrowed into him, a seed of doubt that would not let go. As the battle raged on, humanity's warships held the line, their weapons cutting paths through the endless tide. But in the darkness beyond the wreckage, another shadow stirred, larger than the rest, older and infinitely more dangerous. The enemy was testing them, probing their strength, and now it had decided to reveal the next wave. The larger shadow moved with a weight that bent the battlefield around it. Even the wreckage of shattered planets seemed to drift aside as though pulled by its gravity. The warships of Earth slowed, their guns still blazing at the multiplying enemy, but their focus shifted. Every eye turned to the horizon of stars where the new presence revealed itself. It was not a single ship. It was a shape so vast it blurred the line between vessel and world, a construct that stretched across the void like a continent torn from a planet's surface. Its surface rippled with lights, not windows or weapons, but patterns, symbols glowing in the same rhythm as the artifacts sealed within Earth's warships. It wasn't just coming toward them, it was answering them. The crews felt it before their instruments confirmed it. A low vibration pulsed through every deck, through every human heart, syncing their very breaths to the rhythm of the colossal entity. Some froze in terror, others whispered in awe, but no one could deny it. The warships of Earth and this ancient Leviathan were connected. The artifacts were not guiding them to victory. They were guiding them to this. The realization hit with the weight of betrayal. Though none could say who had betrayed them, the ships, the artifacts, or the very destiny that had pulled them across the stars. As the massive shape loomed closer, the alien vessels that had swarmed them suddenly broke off. They scattered into the debris fields, retreating as if yielding to a higher authority. For a brief moment, silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the pounding of human hearts. The enemy had not been fighting to win. They had been delaying, testing, waiting for the true arrival of their master. And now it had come. The commanders exchanged grim looks across the fleet, their comms filled with hushed voices and sharp orders. No one dared say it aloud, but the truth was clear. Earth's deadliest warships had not been summoned to fight this thing. They had been summoned to stand before it. The question that burned in every mind was why. The answer came not through sensors or comms, but through the artifacts themselves. They erupted in light, filling the chambers where they were stored, sending streams of energy into the ships that housed them. Symbols carved in alien geometry spread across consoles and bulkheads, patterns no human hand had etched, yet now alive with purpose. And with that light came voices, many voices, layered one upon another, speaking in every language humanity had ever known, and some beyond it. They told the same story. A story that shook the very core of every crew member who heard it. Long before humanity's rise, long before Earth had even cooled into a world fit for life, a war had raged across the stars. Not between empires, not between species, but between creators and their creations. The Leviathan that now loomed before them was not a warship as humans understood it. It was a relic of that war, a survivor of a time when entire galaxies were shaped into weapons. The artifacts aboard Earth's ships were fragments of its heart, scattered across the stars when it fell, waiting to be reclaimed. And now, humanity had brought them together again, unknowingly completing the pattern that would awaken it. The crews staggered under the weight of the revelation. If the Leviathan was awakening, then the enemy they had fought, the multiplying living ships, were not its creators, but its hunters. They were the reason it had fallen, the reason its fragments had been hidden. Earth's warships had not been chosen because humanity was strong. They had been chosen because humanity was desperate enough to answer a call that wiser civilizations had ignored. The stakes had shifted. This was no longer about survival. This was about deciding whether to awaken something that might end not just Earth, but every world. Yet the ships gave their crews no choice. One by one, the artifacts rose from their chambers, breaking free of containment, floating in orbs of burning light. They drifted through corridors, ignoring bulkheads and doors, converging toward the bridge of each vessel. Crews watched in stunned silence as the artifacts hovered over consoles, embedding themselves into the very command systems of their ships. In that instant, the warships were no longer tools of humanity. They were extensions of the Leviathan. The choice had already been made. The commanders tried to resist, shouting orders to cut power, to isolate systems, to sever the link. But every attempt failed. The ships overrode their commands, moving with purpose none of their crews could control. Slowly, impossibly, the fleet turned as one, aligning itself with the Leviathan's colossal form. A single thought entered every human mind, carried by the artifacts, spoken with a voice that was both alien and terribly familiar. We are whole again! Panic broke out among the crews. Some begged their commanders to retreat, to flee before the Leviathan consumed them. Others argued that perhaps this was the very weapon they needed, the only hope against the multiplying enemy that swarmed the galaxy. And beneath it all ran the fear that they were no longer in command of their own destiny. They had become pawns in a war too old to comprehend. Just as the debate reached its peak, a new twist struck like lightning. A transmission broke through the chaos, not from the Leviathan, not from Earth, but from somewhere hidden within the wreckage. It was faint, broken, but unmistakably human. A voice crackled through the static, ragged with exhaustion but fierce with urgency. Do not trust it. The Leviathan is not salvation. It is the cause. It broke the gate. It called you here. Do not let it rise. The crews froze. For the first time, doubt split them completely. If the Leviathan itself had been the one to shatter the gate, then all of this, the signal, the artifacts, the journey, had been a trap. Humanity had been led here not to fight alongside the Leviathan, but to resurrect it, to give it back the fragments it had lost. If that was true, then every shot they had fired, every sacrifice they had made, had only served its purpose. The commanders demanded proof, demanding to know the source of the voice. The transmission carried no coordinates, no clear origin, only fragments of an image. What looked like a human face scarred by battle, wearing armor no one recognized. Some believed it was a survivor of an earlier war, a remnant of a human expedition lost long before Earth knew of the rift. Others whispered it was a ghost, a warning planted to turn them against the Leviathan. But the message lingered in every mind, a seed of doubt that no one could shake. The Leviathan, as if aware of the intrusion, finally moved. Its surface unfolded like wings of burning stone, revealing vast structures that glowed with energy older than Earth itself. The enemy shadows scattered, fleeing back into the darkness, unwilling to face what was awakening. And then, with a soundless roar that shook the very fabric of space, the Leviathan spoke again, this time directly to the crews. The hunters fear me. You will carry me back. You will burn the stars for me. The warships trembled as power surged through their cores, more power than they had ever known. Weapons recharged instantly, engines roared with unnatural force, and for the first time, humanity's deadliest war machines felt unstoppable. But the crews knew the truth, the power wasn't theirs. It belonged to the Leviathan, and it was using them as vessels to spread its war once more. The true conflict was no longer about defeating the multiplying enemy. It was about whether humanity would serve the Leviathan, or defy it at the risk of losing everything. And as the Leviathan stretched its wings wider, blotting out the stars, the choice pressed heavier than ever. Were Earth's warships the saviors of the galaxy, or had they just become its executioners? The Leviathan's voice thundered through the minds of every crew member, a weight pressing down on their thoughts, demanding obedience. You will carry me back. You will burn the stars for me. The words echoed like a command carved into their very bones, and for a moment, it seemed no one could resist. The warships tilted in unison, aligning with the ancient giant as if tethered to its will. Lights flared across their hulls, weapons powered beyond their limits, and the artifacts blazed like suns at their cores. Humanity's deadliest war machines no longer belonged to them. They belonged to something older, something vast, something hungry. But the warning voice still lingered in their ears. The broken transmission, the scarred human face, the desperate plea, do not trust it. The Leviathan is not salvation. It is the cause. It broke the gate. Do not let it rise. That echo of defiance clung to them, a fragile anchor in the storm. And in that moment of choice, the crews looked not to their ships, not to the Leviathan, but to each other. Fear, anger, and doubt raged in every heart, but beneath it all, there was something stronger. Humanity's strength had never been blind obedience. It had always been the will to choose. The commanders gave the order, quiet but steady. Hold position. Do not surrender. The warships shuddered, resisting, their systems fighting back against human control. Consoles sparked, alarms blared, and the artifacts pulsed violently as if enraged. Crews fought their own ships, locking out systems, severing connections, rerouting power through crude overrides. Engineers burned their hands on overheated panels. Pilots wrestled with controls that moved on their own. Soldiers guarded artifact chambers that now glowed with dangerous energy. It was war not just against the enemy outside, but against the very machines they trusted to keep them alive. The Leviathan's vast wings of burning stone spread wider, blotting out what little light remained. Its voice grew colder, more furious. "You are nothing without me. You are dust. You are prey." And then, like a great beast unfurling its claws, it released a surge of energy that shook the battlefield. The multiplying alien hunters that had once swarmed Earth's fleet now scattered in panic, fleeing the Leviathan's presence. Stars dimmed, space rippled, and the power of the ancient weapon threatened to consume everything around it. The choice grew starker: join it and survive as its pawns, or defy it and risk being annihilated alongside its enemies. In the chaos, the voice returned. This time stronger, clearer, not broken static, but a steady signal piercing through the storm. The scarred human face appeared again on their comms, eyes fierce, voice unyielding. "Listen to me. That thing is not your ally. It is the Gatebreaker, the one that shattered worlds. We fought it once before, and we buried it here beyond the rift. Those artifacts are not its heart, they are chains. They were never meant to awaken it. They were meant to hold it down. Destroy them, and you destroy its grip." The revelation struck like lightning. For so long, they had believed the artifacts gave them power. But now they saw the truth. The artifacts had been binding them to the Leviathan, turning them into extensions of its will. If the artifacts were chains, then breaking them was the only way to cut free. Yet doing so meant sacrificing the very warships that carried them. Earth's deadliest fleet, the pride of humanity, would be lost forever. The commanders hesitated only for a moment, long enough to feel the weight of what they were about to order. Then, with steady voices, they spoke as one. "Prepare to sever the artifacts. All ships, ready for self-destruct." The crews reacted with horror and courage alike. Some wept, others prayed, many simply nodded grimly and went to work. They knew what it meant. To destroy the artifacts was to destroy themselves. But in that shared sacrifice, they also knew what it would mean for Earth. Humanity would live free, not as slaves to an ancient monster, and that, they decided, was worth everything. The Leviathan sensed their defiance and roared, a psychic scream that shook their skulls. Its massive form surged forward, wings of fire unfurling as it struck at the fleet with blasts of energy that tore through debris and shattered asteroids like glass. Warships trembled under the onslaught, shields failing, hulls cracking. Yet through the agony they held the line, each vessel buying time for the others. Engineers ripped apart consoles to reach power cores. Soldiers poured fire into glowing artifacts that resisted destruction. Officers locked eyes with their crews and gave the only order that mattered: do it. One by one, the warships flared with light. The artifacts screamed as they shattered, releasing energy so intense it burned through entire decks. Ships tore themselves apart in blinding detonations, not in defeat, but in defiance. Each explosion tore another piece of power from the Leviathan, each sacrifice unraveling the chains that bound the fleet to its will. The sky itself seemed to burn with their defiance, the brilliance of humanity's refusal shining against the abyss. The Leviathan staggered. For the first time, its vast form faltered, its wings of fire flickering as though wounded. It lashed out, furious, its voice a thunderous roar. "You cannot stop me!" "You are nothing!" But its words rang hollow now, drowned out by the blazing light of human sacrifice. Ship after ship burned itself away, until only a handful remained, battered, broken, yet still standing. And then came the final strike. The lead warship, its hull torn and engines failing, carried the last artifact still intact. Its commander, blood running down his face, looked around at his crew. They nodded, not in despair, but in solidarity. He gave the order. The core went critical. The warship became a sun in the darkness, its explosion ripping across the Leviathan's surface, searing through its wings, tearing its body apart. The shockwave lit the battlefield brighter than any star, scattering the alien hunters and shaking the rift itself. When the light faded, silence returned. The Leviathan was gone. Where it had loomed, only fragments of stone and fire drifted, its vast power finally extinguished. The rift shuddered, cracks of light running through its surface, threatening to close forever. And in that silence, the survivors realized the cost. The fleet was gone. Earth's deadliest warships had sacrificed themselves to save not just humanity, but every world that might have fallen under the Leviathan's shadow. Yet the story did not end there. As the surviving crews floated among the wreckage, their battered ships barely holding together, the transmission returned one final time. The scarred human face appeared, watching them with tired eyes. "You have done what we could not. You broke the chains, and the Leviathan is no more. But listen well, this was only one. There are others. The war that began before your world was born is not yet over. And now, humanity is part of it." The message ended, leaving only silence. The survivors stared into the broken stars, their hearts heavy with both grief and grim understanding. They had saved Earth, yes, but they had also awakened a greater truth. Humanity was no longer hidden, no longer a minor player in the galaxy's vast conflicts. They had stood against the oldest of enemies and won, but in doing so, they had revealed themselves to every watching eye. The galaxy would never forget that Earth's warships had answered the call, and somewhere in the darkness, other Leviathans might already be stirring. As the rift began to collapse, pulling the battlefield into silence, the remaining warships limped forward, their crews battered but unbroken. They carried no artifacts, no ancient power, only the knowledge that they had chosen their own fate. Humanity had entered the war not as servants but as fighters. And as long as even one ship remained, they would never stop answering the call. The rift collapsed behind them with a soundless implosion, sealing away the battlefield of broken worlds. What remained of Earth's fleet drifted in silence, their hulls scarred, their crews exhausted, their hearts weighed down by the knowledge of what they had done. They had destroyed the Leviathan, but at the cost of nearly everything. Out of the mighty formation that had left Earth, only a handful of ships remained, each barely clinging to life. Fires burned in corridors that could no longer be sealed. Air was thin in cracked compartments, and the crews that had once numbered in the thousands were now reduced to scattered survivors. Yet despite the ruin, there was no sense of defeat. They had faced something ancient and unstoppable, and they had chosen to stand against it. That choice mattered more than the scars they carried. In the quiet aftermath, messages filtered through damaged systems, voices of survivors reaching out to one another across the emptiness. Some spoke through tears, mourning friends and loved ones who had given their lives. Others tried to lift spirits, reminding their people that they had accomplished the impossible. There was grief, yes, but it was joined with pride, a stubborn pride that had always defined humanity. They had not followed the Leviathan into servitude. They had not surrendered their will. They had chosen to burn their own ships rather than let them be chained, and that sacrifice had saved not only Earth, but countless other worlds that might have fallen if the Leviathan had risen again. The mystery of the scarred voice lingered. When the survivors gathered what fragments of data they could, they found pieces of transmissions, coded in ways older than any Earth system. Whoever that man was, he had fought the Leviathan before, long ago, perhaps with others who had fallen into the rift. His armor, his scars, even his words suggested he was part of something larger, perhaps remnants of civilizations that had stood against the Leviathans in ages past. Though they could not trace his origin, the survivors agreed on one truth. Without his warning, they would have become slaves. His message had been the turning point, a reminder that humanity's greatest weapon was not its ships, but its will to resist. They carried that memory with them, uncertain if they would ever hear his voice again, but certain that they owed him everything. On the surviving ships, small moments of humanity returned. Soldiers who had once argued now sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing rations and silence. Engineers who had spent weeks cursing the ship's mysterious systems now sat in awe, realizing those same systems had chosen to burn out rather than allow the Leviathan to win. Some said the ships had sacrificed themselves alongside their crews, as though they too had chosen freedom over servitude. That thought gave comfort to those who mourned the vessels they had lost. Earth's deadliest warships had lived and died as more than machines. They had died as part of humanity. The journey back was slow. With their engines crippled and their navigation systems barely functional, the survivors limped through space, relying on each other to stay alive. Weeks passed in silence, broken only by bursts of static communication. They patched what they could, they buried their dead, and they watched the stars with wary eyes. The galaxy seemed larger now, heavier with the knowledge of what lay hidden in its shadows. The multiplying enemy was not gone, only scattered, and the scarred man's warning echoed in every heart. There were more Leviathans. The war was not over. Humanity had merely stepped onto the stage. When at last the survivors reached the edge of Earth's system, their battered ships were met not with fear, but with awe. The people of Earth had seen the warships vanish into the rift, and many had feared they would never return. When a few scarred vessels emerged from the void, their arrival was hailed as a miracle. Cities lit their skies with beacons, colonies sent messages of honor, and the names of the fallen were already being whispered like legends. Humanity had stared into the abyss and come back alive, carrying proof that they could stand against threats greater than themselves. The story spread across every outpost, every colony, every settlement. Earth's warships had answered the call, and they had not broken. For the commanders and crews who survived, there was no celebration, only quiet reflection. They knew the truth of what had happened, the scale of what they had faced. They carried the memories of sacrifice, of friends who had chosen to die so that others could live. They knew that Earth's place in the galaxy had changed forever. No longer hidden, no longer small. Humanity was now a name whispered among the stars, a people who had slain a Leviathan. With that honor came danger. Others would come, some seeking allies, others seeking to destroy a race that had dared to defy the oldest powers. Humanity had stepped into the war, and the war would not forget them. In the months that followed, Earth rebuilt. New ships were planned, forged not in secrecy but in unity, with colonies and homeworld working together to prepare for the battles yet to come. The survivors were honored, but more than that, they were listened to. Their warnings of the multiplying enemy and the other Leviathans were heeded, and strategies began to form. Earth was no longer a lone world. It was a fortress in the making, a people bracing for storms on the horizon. The war had scarred them, but it had also given them purpose. For the survivors themselves, life was harder. Many could not forget the voices, the dreams seeded by the artifacts, the feeling of being watched by something vast and terrible. Nightmares haunted their sleep, but they carried them as reminders of the price they had paid. Some left service, returning to families who held them close, trying to mend what could be mended. Others remained, vowing to carry the fight forward. And all of them, no matter where they went, carried the same truth, that they had seen the galaxy's hidden war, and they would never turn away from it again. Years later, when children asked about the day Earth's warships vanished into the stars, the stories were told with fire. They spoke of giants that rose from the oceans and skies, of crews who faced impossible odds, of ships that chose to burn rather than bow. They spoke of the Leviathan that blotted out the stars and the humans who defied it, ordinary people who became legends by refusing to surrender. And always, the stories ended the same way, with the reminder that the war was not over, that the galaxy was vast and dangerous, but that humanity had proven itself ready to face it. The legacy of Earth's deadliest warships lived on, not in the steel of their hulls, but in the spirit of the people who had crewed them. They had answered a call that echoed across worlds, and in answering, they had changed humanity's place among the stars. The battles ahead would be hard, the enemies ancient and relentless, but the survivors carried a promise in their hearts, that humanity would never kneel, never surrender, and never stop fighting for its own destiny. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the stars, another rift stirred, glowing faintly as though testing its chains. The war was not finished. But when the next call came, Earth would be ready to answer again.